in life and in leadership, you're gonna fail. I mean, you're gonna make bad decisions, you're gonna make bad calls, and you've got to allow yourself to recover from that. Even if others don't allow you to.
All right, ladies, gentlemen, and folks, and welcome to the New Moses podcast, where we discuss leadership and the nuance in the new day. Today, I'm your host, Rudens Vitel, but most call me Rudy. And today, we have a very special guest with us. You could call him the big boss, my boss's boss's boss, Dr. Vernon Hurt, who is the Vice President of Student Affairs at Towson University. And he's been here a very short time, and he's come at a very unique time in the midst of this pandemic with COVID-19. But his influence and impact as a leader has been felt, though we're in unprecedented times. Currently, he oversees over 18 different departments and areas, which includes my area of campus life, residence life, and a host of other areas. But today, our hopes is to really talk to him and really get a glimpse of his mindset, philosophy, thought process around leadership. So I'm going to kind of turn over to Dr. Hurt to introduce himself.
Great. Well, Rudy, I appreciate the invitation, the opportunity to be a part of the podcast today. As you say, it is interesting times. It has certainly been quite the introduction to the Towson University community. But, I found that in moments of crisis or in the tight moments, you get a chance to get a better sense of the community in which you're
Mm.
joining. And so one of the things I've really been impressed with is just the resiliency, the commitment of our team, particularly in the Division of Student Affairs, and just the talent that we have as a part of our team. So, kind of the takeaway for me has really been, we're managing this crisis, but wow, the possibilities and the growth that we're going to see as a team following this season, I think it's going to be immense because we just have such talent and commitment as a part of our team. So it's an exciting time to be here.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. It's good to hear that. So we want to get a little bit more about you and your kind of your upbringing. So can you kind of tell us about like your upbringing and what are some like the key moments of your life that you think influence your leadership today?
Sure, sure. So, I'm a native of Richmond, Virginia. I was primarily raised jointly by my parents and my grandparents, and so I think my style is a little bit new school and old school,
Mm,
just personally, but also in terms of my leadership. Um, both, particularly with my grandparents, both were leaders in their own right. Both in the kind of community context, professionally. My grandmother was a teacher, and my grandfather worked in banking technology,
mm,
and they just had both had a certain resiliency about them that really shaped who I am, shaped my work ethic, shaped how I see people. And one of the things I learned from them is the importance of investing in people, and that
right.
has really shaped and is at the core of my leadership style. So I grew up in Richmond, Virginia. um, a lot of my early leadership experiences came in the church. I grew
Mm,
up in the church, and often, if that's a part of one's background, that's often the first platform that
right.
you have in terms of being able to have opportunity to lead and develop skills that become transferable as you move forward. And so, grew up in Richmond. Eventually, graduated from high school. I went to Bowie State University for
Mm,
undergrad. Loved it. Met my wife there, and it was a really transformative experience for me in
mm,
that um, I was in a academic community that I felt as though the entire community was fully invested
mm,
in my success, um, and that really is what got me thinking about a career in higher education. when I was in high school, my intent was actually to become an aerospace engineer.
Mm.
And part of that is I study process, I study kind of systems, and so I think that attraction to engineering, it had a lot to do with that. And as you know, it fits in the work that we do in
Right.
higher education in terms of thinking about systems, thinking about the big picture, and how we fit. And so my experience at Bowie State just really opened my eyes to wanting to be for other students what the student affairs professionals and the faculty at Bowie was for me. And so
Hmm.
I left Bowie State really with the mindset of being a faculty member because I didn't really know about student affairs.
Right.
At the HBCU, the whole campus feels like student affairs.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so I didn't really see a delineation. And it wasn't until I went to graduate school where I kind of discovered student affairs as a function, as a profession. And so I took a pivot from moving towards being a faculty member to going to be a student affairs professional. So I talked the director of the Black Cultural Center into allowing me to do a year long assistantship. And that was my first kind of taste of student affairs as a professional. So I came into the Black Cultural Center and provided leadership for the minority at the time, minority achievement program, which was a peer mentoring program that was being revamped.
Hmm.
And I just was like, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to do. And so I left Tennessee, went to the College of William and Mary in Virginia, and began my career there as assistant director, multicultural student affairs. Eventually became interim director of that office, and we got a new vice president of student affairs who had the vision of expanding the diversity, equity, and inclusion work. And so
Hmm.
she expanded what was multicultural affairs to be the Center for Student Diversity. And so I had the privilege of serving as the inaugural director
Mm.
of the CSD at William and Mary. And when you've worked in uh, DEI work, you recognize that much of your work is inspiring change
Right.
on campus. And I really wanted to be in a situation and a role where I could apply a DEI lens but really be in a decision making space. And
Hmm.
so that's when I started to think about the dean of students role.
Right.
And I saw the dean of students. I saw the impact that the dean of students at that time at William and Mary had on the student experience. And so I had an opportunity to do a shadowing experience with her, and that led to kind of an appointment. I became associate dean of students and director of the CSD, um, and just really grew in that role. And I was recruited to go to Iowa State University as the associate vice president and dean of students in 2017. I
Mm.
believe it was, and spent almost 3 years there. And I'm not sure who, but one of the things you learn about this field is that relationships, matter, and some
Mm.
people are watching. Sometimes you don't know they're watching,
Right.
and someone who, to this day, I don't know who, nominated me as a potential candidate for vice president of student affairs at Towson University.
Wow.
And I knew of Towson because of my time at Bowie State. But it was clear that Towson University was a much different institution than it was
Hmm.
in 1997. And so I was really attracted to the vision, the energy, the opportunities that I saw for the future at TU.
Right.
And here I am, about 8 months
Wow.
into the experience now, and loving it.
Wow. I mean, wow. You have a very extensive background, a lot of different experiences. So my next question then is, like, what is your leadership philosophy? Knowing that you've gotten all this different experience, I'm sure you have a lot of different people in your corner. Like, what is your leadership philosophy? Like, when did you discover it, and then uh, how did you adopt it? If you can
Sure,
explain
sure.
that for us.
So I think, it really goes back to, I mentioned my grandparents earlier. So they have always been kind of servant leaders. They've always been folks who've given up themselves and invested in people. Um, and what I didn't share, is I'm also a ordained minister. And
Mm,
so I also served as a pastor, a senior pastor of a congregation in Virginia for 7 years while I was at William and Mary. And so, one of the things that um, I have come to appreciate, both in lessons from my grandparents, you know, uh, as a pastor, and then in my leadership studies, discovering this concept of transformative leadership.
mhm,
That is probably the concept that best describes my style. In that,
mhm,
transformative leadership is people centered. So it's about focusing on investing in the growth and the development of people. And why I think that's so critical, particularly as a student affairs leader, is that the success of our programs, of our initiatives to support students, are very much tied to the people who lead them, the people who develop those programs and those initiatives. And so, my mind has always been, if you focus on developing the people, supporting the people who are providing the leadership, then you in turn have more excellent programs and more excellent initiatives. And so I found that to be the case throughout my career, that if you focus on investing in the people and supporting the development of the people, and of course you got to cast the vision, you've got to provide that kind of um, 30,000 foot view of
mhm,
where you're heading as an organization. And then you support the people in bringing their energy, their creativity, their experiences to the table. You just provide programming and initiatives that really continue to go to the next level. And so, I think that probably best describes my approach and philosophy to leadership.
mm. Interesting. You mentioned that you're an ordained minister. And with Towson University being a public institution and a predominantly white institution, I guess my next question becomes, how does your identities, as an ordained minister, also as a brother of Alpha Phi Fraternity Incorporated, and as a black male, how do those different identities come into play as you lead and navigate leadership in higher education?
It's one of the things that we encourage of our students is authenticity. And so what I have found is that, you know, we can't just give our students the permission to be authentic. We also have to figure out ways to do that. And so, even in a state institution, my experience and call as a pastor impacts my leadership in terms of, again, being people centered,
Right.
showing compassion, and how we support our students, showing compassion, and teaching, even in most more difficult situations. So when I was a dean of students, student conduct was a part of my portfolio. You know, Meeting with the dean isn't always a happy moment for students. I've had to suspend students, but when you do it with compassion, when you do it through the lens of this being a tool to help you grow and develop, I've
Mhm,
seen students really grow and really have moments of self reflection in some really critical ways that I think were turning points for them because of not approaching the moment as simply a punitive moment, but
mhm,
how do you infuse um, the things that are important about you and your who you are as a person. How do you infuse that in helping the individual grow from that moment? And so I think all of those things, um, are really huge. You mentioned Alpha Phi Alpha,
Hmm.
that commitment to excellence, the commitment to being uh, the leaders
Hmm.
in all that we do, even the being the first. In my current role, I'm the first person of color
Hmm.
as the vice president of student affairs at Towson University, um, the first African American male, and so there are there's a certain responsibility, I think, that
Right.
comes with being the first, that you're setting the tone for those
Hmm.
that came after. And I like to believe that in Alpha Phi Alpha we set the tone and we set
Hmm.
the bar for all
Yep.
those who came after. And so so all those identities really shape my approach and shape my kind of mindset and how I navigate this work, and how I
Hmm.
lead our division.
Wow. Yeah. No. As a brother, Alpha Phi Fraternity Incorporated as well, I concur with those sentiments. 1,000%. 1,000%. Um. So, in our course, in my class that I'm currently taking, we talk a lot about um, managing versus leading, and like, that they're two different concepts, but they intertwine often.
Yep.
So, can you talk about your experiences, and can you provide any examples where those experiences led you to be more of a manager versus a leader, or both, or just talk about that concept a little bit for us.
Sure. So this COVID moment is
Mm.
really kind of brought that out. On one hand, as a leader, you're energizing, you're
Mhm.
instilling kind of the hope in the moment. You are um, modeling kind of a positive lens and a positive energy that the team feeds on. You set the
Right.
tone as the leader, and so that's kind of the importance of leadership in that moment of kind of creating culture, setting the tone, defining uh, the outcomes, or defining the destination that we're heading to as an organization. But at the same time, there are very critical functions and really critical processes that are within our responsibility is the Division of Student Affairs. So everything
Mhm.
from for our campus, COVID testing to quarantine and isolation, housing. So there are processes and there are things that require management. And management focuses in on kind of the logistics
Mhm.
of making progress towards goals. It's looking at the organizational health. It is creating the support and the challenge, if you will, and using the student affairs language in how am I supporting the team? How am I making sure that accountability measures are there, that there are measures of success to keep us continuing the progress towards those goals? So you see, both leadership and management happening, and oftentimes happening at the same time. But as you said, they are different, but they're both very critical. The
Right.
other thing from a management standpoint is really this idea of managing up, managing down. And so in
Mhm.
my space, you know really managing expectations, if you will, of the president in terms of her broader vision, and kind of being that oftentimes the uh, in between, or the buffer
Mhm.
for the leaders who are kind of on the ground doing the work. So it's important that I'm both managing up as well as managing down, for the division that I'm leading.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so I'm just gonna go right to this question because one of the things that I think about a lot of the times for a person like yourself, sometimes it feels like you're so high up that you can't relate, and that I can only imagine that it causes some conflicts when it comes to developing relationships and really cultivating, a community culture, if you will, because there's this hierarchical view that most of us have.
Yeah,
So can you talk to us like how can you talk about managing up and managing down? Like how do you know do what you need to do as a leader, but also cultivate those relationships, knowing that there are some unintentional barriers that get created just for your own positionality.
sure, sure. So it takes time. It takes trust building, um, and it takes just being authentic with it. So one of the things that I've tried to signal to our division in a number of different ways is just a desire to be connected. Relationship
Mm-hmm.
and connection is really important to me. Um, but I'm also very mindful of not undermining uh, the leaders who report to me or the leaders who are part of my kind of leadership team for the division.
Mm-hmm.
And that often comes up with communication. So I'm really open to staff at every level to communicate directly with me, but I'm very intentional about how I loop in and not undermine any of the leadership efforts that are happening, whether at the departmental level or in terms of the AVPs. So I think respecting um, that leadership is really important when you're doing that, because it helps to maintain a culture of trust and a culture of collaboration that's there,
Mm-hmm.
and that the most senior leaders, if I'm coming to a, like I said, department meeting or something like that, or I'm connecting with a coordinator or an assistant director in the office, that there's a trust that I'm my desire isn't to undermine or get knee deep in any operations at that level, but it's really about oftentimes just making that connection, an opportunity to let staff know, I'm aware of the hard work that you're putting in. I'm here to support. Sometimes I want to hear, what ideas and thoughts you have,
Mm-hmm.
because that becomes a part of the mix of data, if you will, as I'm thinking about, the way forward and things that we need to prioritize, within the division. Some people will be very comfortable with that. Um, and then I've been in organizations where, there are others where, because of that hierarchy and because of that dynamic, and sometimes because of history that you're not aware of. Every organization has history. Every organization has culture, and especially as a
Mm-hmm.
new person at Towson University, I'm still learning that. But previous experience has shown me that sometimes you can have a leader who comes before you who has a very different style than you,
Mm-hmm.
and it sets a culture. And so people may have a difficult time of letting go a particular culture or letting go of a particular way of doing things. And so it either takes them a long time to embrace a new leader and a new way of leading. And in
Mm-hmm.
some cases, they never shift,
Right.
because of, their experiences. Some people have been burned. Some people have
Right.
had really negative experiences that just shut them down, forever. And so I'm always kind of mindful of that. And, you got to kind of get the lay of the land and give people time to be able to connect and, adjust and evolve as they're able.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No. That makes perfect sense, and you know, it's something that I always think about when it comes to leaders, when it comes to change or their roles and trying to get people to be a part of the outcomes that they're seeing. And one of the questions that comes up is around motivation. Like, is it the job of a leader to motivate people, or is it really their job to position people that are already self motivated?
Mm.
And I wonder what your thoughts are on that.
So it's probably a little bit of both. You know, um, there's a lot of discussion about where you make investments as
Mm,
leaders, and there's some perspective or philosophies that say, you shouldn't invest in a lot of energy into those who are checked out and those who
mm,
are just simply not on board with the vision. And my experience has been, that's probably true.
mm,
Um, and then you have the folks on the other end who are your game changers, who are the rock stars, who are really moving the vision forward, who are bringing creativity and energy to the place. So you definitely want to, as a leader, invest in those folks. They're going to be key to moving initiatives forward and moving the vision forward. Um, but people are all also on the fence sometimes of the people who are on the fence. So you have that middle group.
right.
You have, and what do you do with that middle group? And my lens has always been, that's a group that's worth the investment, because
Mm,
sometimes the reason that they're in on the fence is due to how, where they're positioned. So if you
right.
if you're kind of in the middle, and part of what's has pulled you, some people get pulled from the high energy and the excitement and the drive to the middle because
Mm,
they are positioned with those on the other end who are checked out and don't care. And so um, they lose motivation over time.
mm,
And so, I think you have just of a great of a chance of coaching and encouraging and positioning those folks in the middle to become game changers, versus the idea that folks who may be kind of in that middle group are just gonna eventually um, become the folks who are absent,
right.
essentially from the organization. I think that happens if you allow it to happen. But
Mm,
you've got to give attention there. Um, so that's the responsibility of a leader. But you also have to, in every case, you got to recognize that um, there's nothing you can make happen. There's nothing that you can force to happen. Your job as a leader is to kind of create the environment and create the culture for people to be able to thrive and flourish.
right.
Um, and most will choose to do so if the culture allows that. But you'll always have folks who um, just aren't there.
Right.
And that becomes a coaching moment. Sometimes I've had staff that I've had to coach to new opportunities
Mm,
because, they were no longer uh, a good fit, or they were no longer motivated by the work, and it was time for their season to come to an end. I had a mentor who always says everybody has an expiration date.
mm,
And so, as a leader, sometimes you have to help people recognize that their expiration date has come, and how do you coach and support them to a new opportunity that they can then become motivated again and become
mm,
energized again. um and so there's so many variables that impact the motivation factor, that you've got to, one, recognize that there are many variables, recognize the things that you have the potential of adjusting, but also recognize that there are going to be some that no matter what you do, you're not going to be able to change that, uh, how they're positioned in that level of motivation, but you still have a responsibility to them to help them grow and develop in some ways, and that might be through a change in terms of
yeah.
professional move.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Um. Uh. Yeah. That that's a little bit personal for me because one of the things I've been thinking about a lot in my own personal life is around like proper mentorship and counsel and getting the proper coaching. so that like this is like the one you're talking about when okay, it's time to move on, it's time to do something different, or you know, you need a new level of accountability um, should be in place. So this next question is for you personally, like,
Sure.
what counsel do you have, or what is the role of counsel in your life that's helped you kind of guide, where you are today? And like, what are your thoughts on counsel at large?
I mean, I think it's really important. Um, I was able to participate in NASPA's aspiring VPSA Institute a couple
Mm,
years ago, and one of the person, the faculty member, um, who was kind of assigned as my coach, who happens to be a VP at a community college in Illinois. Um, one of the things that Carl talked about was this concept of a personal uh, board of directors or a
mm,
personal board of trustees, and these are folks that um, represent, where you are and maybe in a different context,
mm,
as well as where you want to be. And so eventually I want to be a college president. And I'm in no rush to do that. I'm 41 right now, so I think I got plenty of
mm,
time. So I'm in
right.
no rush. But that's ultimately where I wanna head. And so I have, selected folks who, you know, represent the type of leadership, doing the type of work, in the type of context that I could potentially see myself going forward. But
Mm-hmm,
one of the things that he shared that was really kind of eye opening, he said it's not enough to find the people and to select the people, but
right.
they have to be people that you respect so much that you give them permission to check you.
Mm,
And that's often what's missing for us when we if we seek coaching, we seek counsel, we seek um mentorship, is that sometimes we want that relationship, but we don't necessarily give those folks permission to really check us, to really um give us the real perspective
mm-hmm,
and the
right.
real, and that's really critical, because if I'm talking to a mentor or someone that I've identified as a person that I look up to and really respect, professionally and personally, and they can be giving me some sound perspective or some sound things to think about, but if
Mm-hmm,
if I haven't really positioned their voice in a way that says you can really challenge me, then am I gonna really reflect on it? Am I really gonna
right.
take it in? Am I really gonna be willing to act on kind of sound counsel?
Right.
Probably not. And so it's important when I think about my career trajectory. I can identify some key people who pushed me, who challenged me. Moments when they said, you got the potential to get there, but you ain't ready yet.
Mm,
You need to do this, you need to work on this, you need to focus on that. And had I not been humble enough to accept that coaching and grow in those areas and make those adjustments, you remain at the place of potential and never able to begin to actualize. And so that's really important
right.
in not just having it, but really having people that you will give the permission to stretch you and push you
Yeah.
in some important ways that allows you to grow towards where you're heading.
Yeah. Yeah. And what you're essentially describing is, a level of vulnerability that you have to,
Yep.
have. And just speaking for, I guess, men, generally in this moment, that's something that I think most men struggle with, right?
Yep.
Especially when you're younger, and particularly for Black males, unfortunately, uh, in terms of having that proper uh, older male guidance, it's even harder for us to be vulnerable and kind of be sharpened by other men. Um, so, what role in terms of vulnerability? Well, let me rephrase. What role does vulnerability play in your leadership as you kind of navigate things?
Yeah. So that's it's a tough question.
Mm,
Um, because I do think you have to have circles where you can
right.
be, vulnerable, and it is hard for us. um, particularly as folks of color, and I think as Black men,
Mm.
because so often we're the only
Yeah.
in many of these spaces, and so you're not just representing you; you're representing um, a whole community of
Right.
folks, and so your mind gets to working. I know, um,